Silma Ellis expressed gratitude for the property with centralized water storage.
Most Honorable Prime Minister Holness, you promised 70,000 housing solutions, and we are happy to be beneficiaries of that promise, sir. Thank you for not only joining us to celebrate the milestone today, but also for your commitment and that of your government to providing quality shelter for Jamaicans.
Mr. Holness also encouraged the planting of trees with a symbolic gesture as the country moves closer to the target of planting 3 million trees in 3 years. Back in Kingston, Prime Minister Andrew Holness received an update on the Port Antonio Master Plan. The strategy proposes development in road network, housing, healthcare, tourism, as well as commercial and environmental improvement. And that's it for Jamaica House Weekly. Be sure to join us next time for more of the news stories coming out of the office of the Prime Minister.
Good day, I'm Theodore Henry, and this is your JIS News for Tuesday, October 3, 2023. The government is one step closer to putting an end to placing children who are deemed uncontrollable in correctional institutions. This as the Senate on Friday passed the Child Care and Protection Amendment Act without amendments. The new legislation will enable the country to comply with obligations under international treaties on child justice and child rights. It will also establish a just and more equitable means of treating with cases involving children exhibiting behavioral challenges and thereby respond in the best interest of the child. Piloting the bill, Leader of Government Business in the Senate, Senator Kamina Johnson-Smith, says the changes complement the government's work to improve the administration of institutions that support children and families, primarily the Child Protection and Family Services Agency, CPFSA. She says that it will also improve the operations and tools available to the CPFSA to support the nation's children.
The amendments include provisions for the court to issue an interim order. They allow for a non-residential therapeutic order, for a residential therapeutic order. And just to be clear, the residential therapeutic order means that the child should be placed in a designated treatment center for treatment, and the non-residential, yes, means that the child can attend a therapeutic treatment center daily or as required to access treatment. And this will put in place a holistic system for treatment of children with behavioral challenges.
Senator Johnson-Smith says data from the last financial year show that the National Children's Registry received 6,395 behavioral incident reports. These were in relation to children between the ages of 14 and 17.
To say what happens now with those reports, they're routed to an investigations unit, and then they're further referred to the CFSU, which is the Children and Family Support Unit of the CPFSA. Most children who are treated by the CFSU are able to remain with their families during the course of the necessary intervention, but for some who are identified as having severe problems, there is the need for residential treatment, which, in the absence of a suitable alternative facility, invariably has caused and causes these children to be placed under a correctional order.
The government is moving to streamline its communication, which will see ministries, departments, and agencies, MDAs, working more closely together. This is to ensure effective dissemination of official information and promote meaningful engagement with the public. Information Minister Robert Morgan says the strategy has two components. The first is to establish a Communications and Public Affairs Unit in the Office of the Prime Minister, OPM. This will be the central point in the coordination of communications for the government. The second is the re-establishment of the group of government communicators to be chaired by the Director of Communications in the OPM. Minister Morgan says the move will ensure that the government speaks with one voice, making information more readily and widely available to citizens while preventing any misinformation from unreliable sources.
I think that with the advent of misinformation and disinformation, people are yearning for clear, verifiable, direct conversations. And people are yearning for a humble approach to how we speak to them.
Minister Morgan was speaking at a public relations and communications retreat for government officers on Thursday. He charged the communicators to ensure that there is clearer and more effective communication of government policies and programs.
Every single leader of agency and permanent secretary needs to engage a process to look at where the gaps are in your communication and how is it that you can create systems, mechanisms, and processes to improve your communication and your ability to reach people.
Minister Morgan also called for greater use of social media to provide timely and accurate information to the public. In other news, work will soon begin on 2 parochial roads in Hanover. Local Government and Community Development Minister Desmond McKenzie made the disclosure during a recent tour of the parish. He said the Hanover Municipal Corporation is to provide the estimates for works to begin. Minister McKenzie says repairs are to be done on the roadway leading to the Lucy Cemetery and a community road at Prosper in the parish.
I am prepared once the estimate has come in, and we are satisfied that we will commence the process. So I'm not going to say next week or the following week or next month, but it is going to take some time, and I am confident in the technical team here in Hanover that will be working closely with the technical team in the ministry to have the necessary estimates prepared and forwarded to the ministry.
And finally, several Jamaicans have been awarded the Governor-General Medal of Honor for outstanding service to the country and specifically to the Office of the Governor-General. The Jamaica Information Services Senior Technical Coordinator, Seaton Richards, was among the gold medal awardees at Thursday's ceremony at King's House. In addition to gold, silver and bronze medals were presented to privy councillors, representatives of King's House through varied programs and advisory boards, foundations and trusts, close protection officers and other security officers, members of King's House staff, private and public sector representatives, among others, were given the prestigious honor. Governor-General Sir Patrick Allen says the event is a celebration of the recipient's remarkable unwavering commitment to the office of Governor-General and the nation.
Hi, good morning. Hi, good morning, and welcome to another edition of our post-cabinet press briefing. We must apologize for a late start. It's not usual for us, but this morning we have a very special guest to give us an update on several matters taking place in the Ministry of Health and Wellness that are important to your health, particularly what is being done to assist the public in being aware of the dengue outbreak that is taking place and how you can protect yourselves, and also what the ministry is doing to help to protect us Jamaicans from the dengue outbreak. We will have our Minister of Health and Wellness, the Honorable Dr. Christopher Tufton, to join us. I'm going to ask Dr. Tufton if he could join us right now. You're welcome.
Sorry, I'm just trying to organize. Okay, good morning, everyone. My apologies. If the truth is to be told, I am the cause of the late start, not Minister Morgan. He was here well early. Thank you very much, Minister Morgan, and thanks to those who are here. So it's my duty to give you a brief update on the dengue outbreak and the response. We did so in the Parliament last evening, so some information is out there. We have been doing so weekly since the outbreak was declared, but we believe that communicating with the public is important to advise on the status of the outbreak, the precautions to take to protect yourself, and of course what we are doing as government under the respective agencies, the coordination to deal with mosquito search and destroy, to deal with hospital care, and what you can do within your own setting. So this is another of a series of updates, and we will continue. So let me again just thank the Honorable Robert Nesta Morgan and colleagues, and ladies and gentlemen. Since declaring the outbreak, the ministry has initiated its dengue outbreak mitigation plan, which has the following components. It has a search and destroy operation, which really means look for breeding sites wherever they are and destroy them. And in practical terms, it means a couple of things. Firstly, breeding sites are actually primarily in and around your home. So it is in the solid waste that you have at the back of the yard, the old tires, the cans. Once water is captured in those, it becomes a fertile ground for mosquitoes to breed. And invariably, that's where most of them are. It's in the vase, on the whatnot, or the dining room table. It's in the drums. We had a drought up to recently. People store water without covering the drums. The mosquitoes congregate around the edges. They lay hundreds and hundreds of eggs, and the cycle continues. And you see those wiggly things in the water. It's in the, all of the above. So the data suggests that the threat is not alien. The threat originates from within, if I were to be totally frank, and it's within your confines. It's within your yard setting, within the home, within the community, the neighbors, and which requires therefore a response that requires all of us. It means all of us have to search and all of us have to destroy, which is why we say search and destroy. And what destroy means, in practical terms again, is not to find every mosquito and zap them, even though that is part of the response. It is to destroy the breeding sites primarily. So you punch a hole in the tin, the milk tin or the sardine tin or the whatever. You punch holes in the tires, the used tires. You cover the containers for potable water. So you put a mesh over them or a piece of iron or whatever so that the mosquitoes can't get in. So that's really what it is, neutralizing the breeding sites. Now that for us is a big function of public education in the first instance, and there are a number of public education initiatives that are taking place at the national level. You will see it on social media. Follow the Ministry of Health website. Every day we put out multiples of flyers, information around search and destroy, around symptoms, etc. You will see it through our cooperative agencies like the JIS, if you go and tune into their sites. You will see it covered in the mainstream media, and you will see it in the communities, primarily carried out by our community health aides, or vector aides, and their public health officers who provide critical support. And we have just over 215 or so permanent staff, about 500 temporary staff, and we are now looking to hire another 600. So all told, they will fan out across parishes, they will go into communities, they will inform, educate, provide flyers, and they will help to inspect, because they are trained to determine breeding sites and the presence of the particular threat. And they will also take with them the neutralizing agent thing that they put in the water to neutralize or provide guidance. So that's a key part of our operation. The other is clinical management, and the CMO is here. She can speak more to that, but it's very important. I'll comment on that. That's how do we deal with persons who are affected? What are the symptoms? What are the treatment? The other is workforce management, mobilization of the teams in the field, surveillance, continuing to collect information to determine what is out there, what the trends are suggesting, and whether or not we are seeing an increase or a decrease. And we have sites across the country. We collect at the level of the parishes. We have an epidemiology unit, which is really a statistical unit that gathers that information and provides information for us to then determine what the next course of action is. And we deploy in areas where the threat levels are high, the most of the resources. And as I said, public education. So in specific terms, there has been a 300 million allocation. The government of Jamaica, through the Ministry of Health and Wellness, has allocated in the initial stages 300 million Jamaican dollars. The increase has pushed the country, the 96 million has been provided to support mitigation works under the municipal authorities, the parish councils, through the Ministry of Local Government. So Minister Mackenzie will marshal that response. It's important because our municipal authorities, first of all, are part of the public health response at the parish level. Secondly, they have an infrastructure through councillors, elected representatives, as well as the administrative representative, who are able to provide micro-management support in communities. So it's very important because, as I said, that's where the breeding sites are. So that initial support will go to supporting those efforts, and we will provide technical guidance, and the allocation will be done based on the technical guidance. The National Works Agency will coordinate cleaning of major drains in the high-risk communities, funded through the National Health Fund, 160 million. Now, the National Works Agency, again, is a very important agency that deals with major drains. And there are low-lying areas in parts of the country where the index, and we monitor the index by inspecting these containers, whether drains or otherwise, looking at the number of containers or water catchment areas that have mosquitoes breeding, and then we determine an index. So if you inspect 10 containers and you find 9 with mosquitoes breeding, then the index is high. If you inspect 10, only 2, then the index is likely to be low. So that's the kind of math that determines high-risk areas. And the Works Agency will take on the larger projects, which would be the major drains. So communities like in St. Catherine, so say Portmore, or there are other low-lying areas in Clarendon, in Westmoreland, where you have streams running stagnant water that is clean enough to breed the mosquitoes. They don't breed in all types of water. They're more into cleaner water, pools of water. Then where there are larger catchment areas, then the NWA will go in with the backhoe and the other things to provide that kind of support. So they have been resourced, and they have been given a technical guide that has been done by the environmental health people, the vector management team, to say this is where the high-risk areas are. So we start there. It's subject to change, but we start there. And then there's a $75 million that is allocated to the National Solid Waste Authority for the removal of bulky waste. Now, the National Solid Waste, as you know, is this, as I said, Solid Waste Removal and Appropriate Disposal Authority. A lot of the breeding sites are actually contained in solid waste. I just said it, right? The used tires, the old fridge and the old stove and the things that are inappropriately disposed of. The rain falls, water catches in it, and you'd be surprised the small pools of water that become breeding sites for hundreds of mosquitoes. So you really want to move those solid wastes from communities and properly dispose of them. And so NSWMA is an appropriate part of the response. So they have been mobilized in addition to what they do normally to provide that. So when you combine the municipal authorities, the National Works Agency, National Solid Waste, plus what Ministry of Health will do with its team in the field, what you get, and the public education, what you get is a overarching, holistic approach. Well, we haven't stopped there. We have mobilized the private sector and non-governmental organization to increase awareness and support actions around dengue, both from an awareness perspective but a response perspective. It has to be all hands on deck because that's the nature of the threat that we face. So that's the primary response. I will say that the response will adjust with time. It's a dynamic process. So the fact that 300 million is allocated today doesn't mean that we won't have to allocate more next month. In fact, as I said in the Parliament yesterday, the technical advice given, at least up to this point, is that we are anticipating that the dengue outbreak will last through to the end of this year, and possibly more than likely into the first quarter of next year. And it's not just a function of the response, it's a function of the cycle of the threat, in that you don't just start and stop it. If mosquitoes are there and they're carrying the virus, given the nature of the virus, given the extent to which breeding sites are currently in the population, they're going to replicate themselves, and it becomes a trend to slow it down, and it goes to a peak, and then it dissipates, hopefully, over time. So it's important to telecast that to the population so that people, Jamaicans, know, and the partners that we have know, that we're going to have to be at this for a few months to come, and the precautions are going to be necessary, as well as the response effort and possibly the resources that are required. So this is a start of a process. So this is what the data suggests. On Friday, September 29th, 2023, the Ministry's National Surveillance Unit showed that the number of presumed suspected and confirmed dengue cases has increased to 1,117, 160 confirmed cases. Of that, 158 type 2, serotype 2, we say, 1 serotype 3, and 1 serotype 4. And of course, there's a difference between suspected and confirmed. Suspected means all the symptoms suggest. Confirmatory linked to some clinical testing that yields the presence of the virus or the antibodies. What is important to note in this is that type 2 is the most popular strain. So you'll see on your screen, if you're at home, 160 confirmed, but over 1,000 suspected. When we suspect, doctors treat as if it is until you get confirmatory. But the representative sample of confirmatory gives you a general indication of what the wider population is facing. So 158 is quite representative of the 1,000 plus. And when you dissect the 1,000 plus, and you get the overwhelming majority, 158 being type 2, it is a confirmation, 99%, I think, margins of error, but limited, that the population has the dominant type 2 strain. Now, what is important to be noted on that is that we haven't had that strain in the population since 2010. Now, I'm not a clinician, but I'll give it my best shot. But my CMO is here to give me all the support when I make mistakes. There are 4 types of dengue, 1, 2, 3, 4 strains. The fact that we have had the strains before over time, it's endemic, the Aedes aegypti mosquito, it's always here. The type 2, the fact that we haven't had it since 2010, means that to the younger population, it is relatively novel. It's new. Because it is new, there's resistance to it. There's no automatic resistance, so they are more vulnerable to getting it. In other words, if you get type 2, if you had type 2, it would significantly protect you against the virus now, if you've had it before. It wouldn't protect you against type 1, type 3, or type 4. So technically speaking, you could actually get 4 types of dengue in your lifetime. 1, 2, 3, 4, before your body develops. And again, it depends on the period of time between when you got it. So type 2 being the dominant strain, based on all the clinical advice, is expected to move through a cycle with a more dominant presence in the younger population because they are not accustomed, they haven't been exposed to type 2. Which is why it's important to give the public education around our children in schools, the parents to take particular attention, the school administrators, principals. We're working with the Ministry of Education. We have had many discussions with them, inspection of schools and so on, because the children are going to be. Now, naturally, our young people are resilient, they're strong, they're energetic, but they do take more chances playing around and so on in the field, and commingling sometimes with even solid waste, the old tires and so on. If they have underlying conditions and they're already vulnerable, then it makes it important that they be given some added protection in whatever way, shape, or form that is possible. So type 2 is a dominant strain, and it is therefore likely to affect the younger population. It is not to say that older population that may not have been exposed before wouldn't be vulnerable also. I believe I'm saying that correctly, right? So if you're over 60, over 70, and you have existing vulnerabilities and you have not been exposed, you are equally vulnerable, or perhaps even more vulnerable. So we normally try to protect the old, the young, the older, age is just a number, right? The older, the younger, but all who have underlying conditions and other vulnerabilities, persons who are cancer survivors, renal issue, any other thing that this could amplify. We have announced that there were 6 deaths being investigated up to a week or so ago. 5 of those deaths have now been classified. 1 death was dengue related, so that's confirmed. 3 were classified as suspected dengue related deaths. And you may need some clarity on that. I'm not going to venture that. If you need that clarity, I'll ask the CMO to explain what investigation revealing suspected dengue means. But I suspect it means it looks like dengue, but they can't confirm it's dengue. And then 1 which is totally unrelated. So the 6th death remains under investigation, or is it 6 other deaths? I'm not sure. Is it 6 other? Huh? The 6th, yeah, the 6th. So I just explained 5. The 6th one remains under investigation. Okay, typo there. All parishes have recorded dengue cases, with Kingston and St. Andrew reporting the highest number of cases year to date. However, when the cases are assessed by population, St. Thomas, Portland, Kingston and St. Andrew, St. Catherine and Hanover have the highest case rates. And it may explain why. In a lot of low-lying areas, water catchment, maybe infrastructure issues which require water catchment and so on. So those parishes would be parishes that are targeted for deployment, but all parishes would be involved. As I said earlier, 5 to 14-year-old cohort continues to be the most affected, followed by children 1 year old and younger based on case population. And so the vigilance of parents is very important. As part of our clinical management of dengue, we are resensitizing our physicians. So that's another one. So the 5 to 14, very critical. 1 year old and younger, very, very important. And there are basic things you can do with a 1 year old or younger. A mesh to cover the sleeping space of that child is quite normal in normal times. Now more than ever, we would advise parents to get that mesh to cover the crib or whatever space that the child is in, to don't allow the access by the Aegis aegypti once it's there. I suspect you could probably do that with a 5-year-old too. But as they get older, it might not be as possible, but you use other methods. The doctors are important, the physicians and the clinical staff. So we remind them during this period as to what the protocol is. So that reminder is symptoms to look out for, medication to recommend, because you have to stay away from certain medication. Again, the CMO could comment on that. And essentially to report these suspected cases, because whether you're in private or public, you're obligated to report these numbers so that we can keep a track and provide support. So that intervention is now taking place, which again is part of the response. Additionally, type 3 to 5 health centers have extended opening hours from up to 8 p.m. So we're extending opening hours to facilitate persons who may have symptoms to access our public health facilities beyond a certain point. We are also allowing University of the West Indies, Hospital of the West Indies, to treat children under 18 years free of cost, because normally when you have severe cases, persons end up at pediatric wards, or if they're in this part of the world, of the country, at the Bustamante Hospital for Children. So we do anticipate pressures on the system at the Bustamante Hospital for Children, and so we're allowing, as we would normally do in the past in times of emergency, UHWI to take the overflow or to take persons who go directly there without any cost, part of the response. Our national health emergency centers are open in the parishes to track the response, and will provide critical surveillance information as these become necessary to the public. We are giving attention to high-risk communities in terms of community engagement with our 700 temporary and permanent vector workers on the mosquito search and destroy. And the fogging schedule has been increased to 7 days each week, which is important. So we will fog every day of the week based on the parish assessment of communities that are high risk, where the Aegis index is highest. And of course, we should look out for that, residents. So you know the foggers and the vehicles and the what looks like smoke, which is really the chemicals to destroy the mosquitoes when they come into your area. Now, persons have been calling, requesting fogging, and we have put that in the schedule, and we put out on a daily basis by parish the fogging schedule that we plan based on the technical information that we get. So if you visit the Ministry of Health's website, you will see if your community is on that list. If you think it needs to be, then you can call or send a note in through the website for attention to be given to that space. And we monitor it, we track it. So that is an ongoing process. I want to use the opportunity to encourage the citizens of communities to welcome the workers. Don't shun them, or worse, don't be aggressive or violent towards them. We have had those cases where persons go in and are stoned and are, abused verbally or otherwise, because some people don't like the fogging. They think it damages their health. If you have vulnerabilities around, being allergic to the fogging, there are ways to deal with it. You can take a wet cloth and put it over the nose and the face. I mean, we are not unaccustomed to wearing masks. Having had the COVID experience, I'm sure you have one somewhere there in the house that you're probably not using. Maybe you need to put it on the whatnot table or the dining room table, just in case you have to use it when you see the fogger man come. Or buy one and keep it. And maybe a little damp the front of it. There are ways to do it. So you can do a makeshift thing, or you can use one of the masks that you have had from the layover from COVID to protect yourself if you think you need that protection. I mean, we don't expect anybody to go into the middle of the mist to inhale it, but once it's out there, it will move across the air and, of course, do what it has to do within your own space. But please do not abuse the folks who are doing it. That's their job. And it is illegal, so you can be prosecuted for anything that is untoward. We have the public education program I've spoken about, and that will continue. We're issuing advisory on a daily basis, and we're doing it at the community level. One of the things I'm hoping that the municipal authorities will work with us on is the town criers in the communities. And so we're going to do some messaging, send it out to the municipal authorities so that you put a town crier in a community, not just to give information around fogging, but give information around the virus, the mosquito search and destroy, what role you can play, that kind of thing. Because sometimes a reminder helps. And so what I'm hoping for is that we'll do some of that. So the communication is not just at the high level, the top level, it takes place at the ground level. And it's good to use the voice of the councillor for the area, because the councillor or the mayor or even the MP will carry hopefully some weight to encourage and influence. Okay, so finally, we are inviting all Jamaicans to help us in this response. It's very important. We have been here before, so it's not, I hope I'm not being too calm that we have a dengue outbreak, because my intention is not to make us complacent, but I do believe that there's nothing here that is required that most of us don't know, or with basic reminders cannot recall. And really, the ultimate response is the personal response. And we will do what is necessary to collaborate through partnerships to prevent, and we're doing what is necessary through the hospital system to treat with once persons are diagnosed accordingly. So thank you very much. CMO, I don't know if you want to, through you, Chairman, Minister, would you like to add anything beyond what I've said? The clinical, maybe? Mr. Chairman, is that fine? Mr. Chairman, Minister? Can I have the CMO add anything technical? Please. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I think I would just take the opportunity to remind persons about the use of medications to relieve fever. In our last outbreak in 2019, we did have some deaths where we thought that there was a relation to the use of some medications. So, first of all, to control the fever, persons should use your normal home remedies in terms of keeping the child cool. Use tepid sponge. However, if you have to use medication, use paracetamol or medication containing acetaminophen. Do not use medications that we call non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. And these include medications like ibuprofen, medications that contain ibuprofen, and also nefamic acid. So please be careful. Consult with your pharmacy. Sometimes it's hard to remember the names of these medications, but please consult with your pharmacist about the medications. Also, please be reminded that most cases of dengue can be treated at home in terms of treating the fever, ensuring that you get adequate rest, hydration, ensuring that you keep up with your nutrition, and most people will recover within 5 to 7 days. However, there are warning signs that will indicate that you're going to severe dengue. And these warning signs tend to be that after the fever has settled, you continue to have severe symptoms, whether it is severe headaches, severe body pains, but you also have nausea, vomiting, abdominal pain, and there may be signs of bleeding. These are very important signs that it means that you need to seek medical advice. And you should either see your general practitioner, you can visit the health center, but if the symptoms are more severe, then you must go to the emergency department. We really do want to caution people, though, about everybody rushing to the emergency department when they only have mild symptoms. At this time, we're not only seeing an overload from persons with viral illnesses, but this time of the year, we tend to have more persons coming in with uncontrolled, non-communicable diseases and the complications thereof. And we are pleading with persons who have relatives in hospital who are what we call social cases, meaning that they have been discharged from hospital, but they still remain in the hospital bed, preventing other persons from getting a bed. We're appealing to persons to go and take their relatives so that we can deal with some of the crowding issues that we have in hospitals. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bisesa Mackenzie. Thank you also to Dr. Christopher Tufton. And at this point in time, we will be accepting questions from members of the media on whichever topic they wish to inquire about. Naomi?
Thank you, Minister. While I await those who are here, the questions, I have some online ministers and CMO, if you would indulge. One, someone who wants to know really how stretched are our hospital resources, particularly when we do have this outbreak of dengue, associated also with the latent issues of COVID-19. Can you paint a picture of really exactly what's happening in the hospitals for this journalist who's not here?
Dr. Tufton? Both of you can come.
I could add also issues on our respirators, you know, in terms of availability for that.
Okay. All right. We would have started to see the reports that we are experiencing overcrowding, you know, especially in our emergency departments. And again, that is why the appeal that we also need to visit our primary care centers to take off some of that load off the emergency departments. I think that most hospitals, especially the type B, the middle level hospitals, the type B hospitals, the regional hospitals, tend to, at this time of the year, really go into facing a burden in terms of the number of persons that are coming in. And, you know, many of these, in terms of the non-communicable diseases, are because people are not taking their medications and they result in crises. And of course, they develop complications of the illnesses that cause them to need to be in hospital. So I can only mention the appeal again in terms of the utilizing your primary care centers, and also for the persons with social cases in hospitals to please to get them out of the hospital so that we can free up our beds. And I'm just also appealing to the members of the public to be patient. Usually we have a good triage system, and we are able to pick up those persons that need attention right away. And so sometimes you will see people rush ahead of you. It is because we consider those to be more of an emergency. So be patient with us in the emergency departments. This time of the year, again, people tend to become very violent, aggressive. They go into the emergency departments, they see the overcrowding. The doctors and nurses, all the people that work in the hospitals are also overwhelmed when they have these large crowds to deal with, and to deal with the aggression on top of it really, really, really places them in a very bad position. So just an appeal to the public as well to exercise patience at this time. Thank you.
If I may, I wanted to just mention two things. One on dengue, and just to reinforce that in normal times we have overcrowding in our hospitals. That's just the reality, particularly those in the urban centers. I mean, there are obvious ones: Spanish Town, Maypen, Mandeville, Cornwall Regional, of course KPH, SAV, because of trauma, bike accidents and so on. St. Anne's Bay, because of trauma, road accidents in particular. So when you have a spike in a particular area, there is almost automatically going to be a build-up. Remember now, we are just about building out and expanding our infrastructure, which hasn't really been done for probably 60 years. So we are excited about the future, but the present does remain very challenging. But I want to mention something that maybe the CMO can comment on, since we have you here as a captive and the information is important. And it's what I refer to, and I've been asking the clinicians to comment, to do some work on, so we can comment more authoritatively. What I titled the triple threat of dengue, COVID, and the flu, which is not, we have had multiple threats emerging at one time to create a kind of perfect storm of concerns, at least in the first instance. Then it's the response clinically in the second instance. The reality is that our dengue, our COVID numbers, even though it is not an indication of a crisis anymore, because symptoms are a lot less and people have learned to live with it, the positivity rate is over 10%. I believe last time we checked it was 13 or something. That was what I was told by our epidemiologist a few weeks back. That's quite high based on standards that we normally find acceptable, which is normally less than 3%, less than 5%. So to be at 10 or 12 is relatively high. Again, not an attempt at alarming anyone, but if you have symptoms that are manifesting themselves, COVID symptoms, and then you are unfortunate enough to have dengue symptoms, and then the flu season is starting, which will go on until probably early New Year. Is that how it works? I think. CMO, remember now, I'm a pseudo doctor, huh? April. That represents a potential deadly concoction or combination for a vulnerable group, which is why we have to be deliberate in terms of our response, and we have to take the possibility of this seasonality of COVID, dengue, and the flu as an important warning, if you will, to protect ourselves and to see a doctor if we find out we have symptoms. So if you're in an environment where you think you're exposed to the COVID virus, people are coughing, sneezing, that sort of thing, it could be COVID, it could be the flu, right? They have a fever, sore throat, it could be COVID, it could be the flu, it could be dengue. If it is 2 or 3, it can become a lot more severe, and so see your doctor. Very, very important. So that triple threat is real. Not a need for alarm, but it is certainly a need to know and to be able to respond. All right, so that's one. The other I wanted to raise was an incident involving children, but maybe I should take the dengue questions first, just in case.
Yeah, I think the person online as well is just asking, as you mentioned children, and I'll just bring that question in then, Doc. concerning our children's hospitals and all the centers that deal with pediatric cases. Apparently they're also teaming. Is there a special protocol, especially parents should bear in mind at this time?
Well, any hospital you go to has a protocol that is already in place around triaging and determining what cases are more serious. So we allow the clinicians to use their training and judgment to determine whether it's a child or an adult, how severe the case is, what the symptoms represent, and how quickly they need to respond. And it's an important opportunity to clarify to Jamaicans that the fact that you turn up first at an emergency ward is not a guarantee that you will get through first. The emergency wards, or accident and emergency, do not, and I repeat, do not operate on a first come, first served basis. It operates on a severe case basis, or most severe case basis. So it is who is greatest in trauma, or most severely affected, or life is being threatened because they have a heart attack, or they have a head injury from a bike accident, or something else. You come there with a headache. Yes, it's an emergency for you. We fully empathize with that. But it cannot, even if you're waiting 3 hours, it can't replace somebody who come with a heart attack or a stroke, because there's a time there that could determine life or death. And we need to do more on explaining to persons that, which is why you wait when you go to A&E. Not just about resources, it's about prioritizing of cases. And more often than not, you can only have one priority at a time. So people will have to wait. Now, I do appreciate that the quality of wait is important. So they must have a chair, they must have some water, they must have clean bathrooms. That's where I think the system needs to respond more effectively, which is why we have the compassionate care program to assess how we wait. But we cannot guarantee, as a matter of fact, it's not going to happen, that you won't wait. Unless you're dying, then you won't wait, because the doctors will respond. So for the cases of dengue and the pediatric cases, what you'll find is that if the severity of the problem, based on the triaging, dictates immediate response, then it normally is. And it's a very emotional thing, because when a parent has a child in his or her arm, and they're waiting for 2 hours, and the child is miserable, understandably so, crying, the emotional attachment and the emotional response, the natural response, is to claim cruelty on the part of the institution, that their child is bawling and they're not getting any attention. But oftentimes, the context of the institution, there may be another child in the room who has something stuck in his throat and he can't breathe, or fall out of a mango tree and is hemorrhaging. Unfortunately, the crying child who may have a discomfort will have to cry until we sort out the child who has a hemorrhage, a blood vessel or whatever, and, as unfortunate also. It's a triage, and that's how the process works. So that's how it operates. So we have a protocol, and those who are most in need will get attention first.
And so the next question online, again, apparently the traffic really held a lot of people off today in terms of physically being here, concerns the issue of the suspected cases, the 3 that are currently still being investigated to be confirmed if it's a dengue-related death.
So maybe CMO need to explain clinically what an investigation revealing suspected means.
Right. So in terms of some clarity on the testing, so we do have at the National Public Health Lab the capacity to do PCR testing. So PCR is the confirmatory test for dengue. Okay, and we have not been out of this. And we do have the capacity. We have reagents on board to continue to be able to test through to the end of the year, and we have more reagents on order. Now, during the first 5 days of symptoms, that's when you will pick up the virus in the blood. So it is very important that when the doctors, healthcare providers are doing the notification of the cases, that they record the date of onset of the illness. Because within the first 5 days, that's when you will get a positive PCR test a confirmatory test for dengue. Now, if somebody presents 7 days after the onset of illness and they have a negative PCR, it does not mean that they did not have dengue, but we cannot confirm it. So if it is that they have the symptoms, then they are a suspected case. They remain a suspected case because we don't have a confirmatory test. Now, after 5 days, we can do the antibody testing to determine if there is an antibody response to dengue. So the virus is now gone and the antibodies have started to increase. And that's when we do the antibody test. Now, we have been out, and really and truly within the region, we have been having an extreme shortage of the reagents for the antibody testing. And right now, we are getting reagents for the IgM testing from PAHO, and we are also able to send those cases that we really want to find out days into the illness. We're able to send some samples to CARFA. So we are doing that in the meantime until we get reagents on board. So the cases that you would have seen that we would have said 4 of the 4 cases, 1 is a confirmed death. It means that we would have been able to do a PCR test. For the 3 that remain suspected, we don't have a confirmatory test, but they fit the case definition, and so they remain as suspected cases.
Thank you, CMO. I think I have just 2 more questions then on dengue, and I think 2 more questions entirely. Having to do with the 300 million, Dr. Tufton, the question from the media is how will it be distributed in terms of being used, and also is that part of the fogging exercise that would go along with it? Can I just add the second question then, which would wrap up the questions I have for dengue, concerning a protocol in-house now, and this I think the CMO would be able to focus on, and I'll just use, for the question asked, use a scenario I saw online where someone was discussing the issue of dengue and said that they sprayed their own house and then went to sleep and had a waking up, so to speak, breathing heavily because they did not open the house for ventilation after spraying. So, Doc, if you could help us to explain to our citizens how that works if you are going to be spraying in your own house, to be doing that, and then maybe a schedule of fogging, and also that 300 million in terms of how it will be used.
Okay, so the Aedes aegypti are found within our homes, okay, and I just want to point out that it's a daytime mosquito. It bites during the day, okay? So the best thing, if you are going to be applying any insecticide spraying like that, it would be best if you're going out in the mornings and you're leaving the house, then you spray like under the beds, etc., those places where they tend to stay. And then when you return, you open the doors and the windows to kind of air out the place, because they will tend to be more around during the daytime, and so you will probably be able to have a better night's sleep. Of course, persons who have respiratory illnesses like asthma or COPD, then they should take the necessary precautions. They don't want to be in an environment where there is spray applied, either being applied now or having applied until the place is properly sprayed out. But you really have a mosquito problem and you really want to do something, so you can take your precautionary medications, your inhalers, to prevent any kind of exacerbation of your illness. So take those precautions. For persons who also suffer from allergies, they may also have responses, and they may want to take their medication for allergies to prevent any kind of response. So those are the things that you should do. I mean, when the sprayers are coming around, make sure that you open your windows and doors so that the spray can come in and to kill the mosquitoes. Okay.
Okay, thank you. So in regards to the issue of the 300 million and how it's spent, firstly, it's not a part of the fogging schedule. The fogging is done by public health, and it's planned each year. It's relatively routine, except that We are increasing the extent of it into weekends and beyond, you know, later at evenings and so on, because of the current situation we have. The 300 million was determined by assessment of the health team, the public health team, who assess the mosquito population in different parts of the country based on reports that they would have gotten, determine the most vulnerable areas, and determine a sort of combination of response to dealing with those most vulnerable areas. So that's pretty much, so there's a report, a technical report that identifies those areas. But as I said before, and I outlined it earlier, it's a moving target, because the fact that Westmoreland is now the top don't mean that they're going to be next month, especially if we intervene. So we will adjust as we go along. It has to be a dynamic process. But the initial allocation was based on a technical report that was done by the technical team. And we identified the parishes that we would go into with these special interventions initially. Any other, Dengue?
Thank you, Minister. No, I have no other questions, Dengue.
Right. So I wanted to...
There's another question, but yes,
oh, sorry. Any other? No, okay.
Yes, go ahead, Minister. I think there's a question on the floor, but it's not related to dengue.
Right. I wanted to comment, since I have this audience, on the incident that took place a few days ago in St. Anne at the Ocherius Primary School, where some 60 or so youngsters between the ages of 5 and 12 were taken to the hospital, St. Anne's Bay Hospital, and had to be placed under observation at the very least, or applied rehydration fluids, or worse, hospitalized up to yesterday. I'm trying to get a report to see if there are any others still in the hospital, which is why I was on my phone. But what I've been told now that there have been except one person. So there were 5 in the hospital. Now there's one, which has remained for a second day. So there are so many lessons to be learned from this incident. For starters, it shows how vulnerable we are and how our children are if we do not pay the necessary attention to their care and guidance. These were unsuspecting kids who were in a safe space, school, and had no reason to feel that they were being exposed to the dangers that was in that sachet that was sold to them, value for more value. They paid for it. They didn't go out looking for it. It was brought to them. And the rest, of course, is history. We have had to hospitalize and treat. Thank God it has not turned out worse, even though there are lingering impact that would need to be assessed on the life of a child who has been traumatized in this manner. And public health is sensitive to that, working with the National Council on Drug Abuse and with the institution through the principal and the Ministry of Education through the minister. But I really want to highlight the case to suggest why we have to be vigilant, why we have to, as adults, be extra vigilant around the protection of our children, even in the safe space of a school environment, and why it is necessary for us to have policies and enforcement of policies around giving them that added protection within that safe space. The government is very seized with that. It is something that we have discussed at the level of cabinet through the minister, supported obviously by the Prime Minister. And from a public health perspective, we have collaborated with the Ministry of Education around how our students are provided nutrition within that safe space through a nutrition policy, which has been under active discussion through a green paper, which means a discussion paper over the past year. A number of consultations have taken place with cafeteria operators, with vendors who sell whether on the premises or on the outskirts immediately outside of the fence and the gates of the schools. And of course, parents were also involved in that process. Where we are now, and it's a joint submission by Education and Health, where we are now is that there's a consultant that is putting together the final report based on the consultations on that green paper. I am happy to report that the ones I certainly have participated in and the indications I've had from the ones I have not, there is overwhelming support for a nutrition policy for our children in the school environment. I did not discern any pushback, and I believe an example such as this one, if there was any doubt in the minds of anybody as to why we need to be play a more activist role in giving that protection, I think that episode in St. Anne demonstrated why we need to. So we are now embarking through a consultant at the level of the Ministry of Education with a written final document which will form the basis for a cabinet submission to be a white paper, so it moves in stages, and then ultimately to go to the floor of Parliament through cabinet for an approval of a new policy. The intention is to try to have that document completed before the end of this year and certainly move to the next stage during the course of this financial year before April next year. And there's going to be a lot of work that is going to be required after that fact. There's going to be the second phase of now implementing that program. So it means training and retraining of cafeteria operators, helping them with menu options in terms of what and how they prepare meals, what the child should be entitled to within that safe space in a given week to create the balance of proper nutrition. And we have to move beyond the days, which are now more often than not the active days, of treating our children every day to a dose of deep-fried protein of some kind and French fries. And I'm not saying that you can't treat them now and then with that, but I'm saying that if you're doing it every day, it becomes a problem. And we've seen the manifestations on that in terms of mortality rate and sickness and so on. So that balanced meal is going to be a critical next phase of the nutrition policy in schools. It's going to involve trying to sanitize the space around sugary drink restrictions, encouraging more water consumption, which is a much healthier option, even though it's stigmatized as being inferior over the branded products. And it's going to require management of our vendors on the inside and outside of the premises. Now, that's going to be difficult, but the truth is we're going to have to try, and it's going to involve all of us. The parents are going to be key in terms of what they give their children and the guidance they provide to them. So we expect a very active period, and for those who don't comply, we will use moral suasion where we must, but we're going to have to use the law where it is necessary. I am hoping that the police identify the perpetrator in the case of St. Anne, but I'm sure there will be potentially more St. Anne's if we are not careful and take the necessary action. So I raise the issue to lament the tragedy that has manifested itself, to offer our support to the family members, the institution, and I do so on behalf of the Minister of Education and the government, but also to project that we are coming with an approach that hopefully will minimize that risk in the future.
Thank you, Minister. Are there questions on the floor? All right, I see. Mr. Stewart.
Morning, Mahiri Stewart from Nationwide News. Question to Information Minister Robert Morgan.
Hi, good morning, Mahiri.
Morning, Minister. My question to you is, does the Wholeness Administration still have confidence in Greg Christie as the Executive Director of the Integrity Commission?
How do I respond to that? We made a commitment not to comment on the Integrity Commission. and I'm not going to break that commitment. I think the media and the public and others have already opined. I don't think we need to add anything to that conversation. Thank you. Any other
Minister,
questions?
I see no other questions from the floor then.
Thank you very much, Naomi. And I want to thank all the members of the media who attended here today. I also want to thank the representatives from the Ministry of Health, Dr. Bisesa Mackenzie, Dr. Chris Tufton, also members of the media who support us here from the Jamaica Information Service and PBCJ, and also the staff here at OPM. Until next week, Wednesday, for another post-cabinet press briefing. Thank you, and may you have a wonderful and safe day.
We have declared that we're now in a dengue outbreak. The dengue type 2 strain is the most prevalent strain right now. The last time this was predominant was in 2010. What this means is that persons less than 14 are more likely to be affected. Dengue type 2 is known to produce a more severe illness. In addition, because persons would have been exposed in 2019 with dengue type 3 or 4, they will now get dengue type 2 as a secondary illness. And secondary dengue is also known to produce a more severe illness. In 2019, our children were affected severely by dengue, and many of them passed. Now, a lot of those deaths was caused by the use of medications such as ibuprofen, diclofenac, and medications called non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs to treat fever. These medications either cause bleeding or worsen bleeding. I'm asking all parents, please consult with your pharmacist. Use only medication with paracetamol or acetaminophen. Use tepid sponge to lower the fever, and if that works, then you don't have to go to medications. But again, I stress, avoid ibuprofen, avoid diclofenac or other non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. For the most part, dengue is a mild illness and can be treated at home. However, persons have to be aware of the warning signs that say that you're going to go on to severe dengue. Severe dengue tends to happen after the fever subsides and you have a persistent of not feeling well, in particular abdominal pain and vomiting. If this happens, then you must seek advice from your doctor. You must either visit the health center, your private practitioner, or the hospital. If your symptoms are severe, then you must go to the emergency room. I'm asking that persons do not rush the emergency departments because the severe illnesses need to go to the emergency departments. And if we crowd the emergency departments, it will delay care, the time to care for these persons that really need to be there.